So you're rebuilding your comics collection, but now you're living in a FEMA tent. You can only have just a few graphic novels. You want to start, and we'll go one after. Like you do one, I'll do one. Okay.
All right. I'll try and do them in the order that I would buy them in.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting.
I'll try. It's kind of gonna. This will be my first one. That is. Are we having fun yet?
I've never seen that. What is that?
So this is the Zippy the Pinhead. It's kind of like a proto-graphic novel. It's from 19. When is the first published game? First is so originally 1985 is when, and it's like this 30-day calendar, and you go through with Zippy amongst this, like, there's whatever, I think it's like 30 days or something, but you travel through like, this is where, if you've ever seen him doing like a Bushmiller, he does it a lot, but this one is like, it's called It's Bushmiller Time. That one, this is like where I heard about Nancy. I was reading this. Like, I picked this one because I think my introduction to comics is a little different than a lot of people's. I didn't grow up reading superhero comics, and I read the newspaper strips every day while I ate breakfast before school. I wasn't allowed to watch TV, so I just read the paper. So Zippy the Pinhead is like, I love Zippy, and then I found about underground comics and alternative comics through, all of it is through Zippy. When I first time I met Bill Griffith, I had him sign it, and I was always really cherished the For Brian, because I was like, man, this book really is like my book.
I don't have anything that cool. Fuck. Yeah, I told you, I'm so basic, but like, for me, like, I just like was like, okay, I like rushed through my bookshelf like as fast as I could, just picked out like, oh yeah, this is great. This is
That's
great.
a good way to do it too. Like, as if there was a fire happening.
Yeah, like no real thought to it, but like I think like one of my favorites, and we talk about this guy on the channel like every video, but yeah, it's like Joe Matt, Poor Bastard. I got a copy of this the first time I met a cartoonist in Denver, and he was like, oh yeah, you got to read this, and he gave me his copy, and I remember it had a big booger on it on one of the pages. And it's like really repulsive, but like I didn't want to throw the book away or anything. So like every time I was like, I'd like read it, because I've read this so many. Like, I read this book annually. I don't think it holds up to 2020 standards. That's the problem. But like, whenever I would read this, like, I always have to like skip the page with the booger on it. But yeah, this is like one of the most. I mean, all of his, he has like 3 books or whatever, but they're all like important. So I would try and like grab the Joe Matt books off the shelf for sure.
All right, and the next is spin off of that. Is the best of Ernie Bushmiller. This is like one of my number one like loaned out books.
Oh yeah.
But I bought this book when I was a senior in high school before the Fantagraphics collections, and like this book to me was just like, it's still one of the best Nancy collections outside of the 5 Last Gasp ones that have really great essays. But this one's great because it has the original How to Read Nancy essay in it.
Yeah.
Which I love that essay. And the Bill Griffiths essay, I think, is in here too. There was a lot of great essays, and like that really like champion the strip. And you get more Fritzy Ritchie probably than any other book. There's the Bubbles one. I just flipped to it. The one I have for my little image on Instagram. Have you read these ones?
I have right next to me, actually. I have this one.
Was that in your pile?
No, it's not in my pile.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I have this one.
This first book is the Bill Griffith essay, and it's just about like the philosophy, like the zen of the 3 rocks, and like that's like something that comes up in Zippy like a lot, is like the 3 rocks thing, and he's always talking about not 1 rock, not 2 rocks, but 3 rocks, and a white picket fence, and like, and reading that essay was really informative to me about like Nancy in general, but also just like art and comics in general and what it can do. Yeah. I think that like my like dream book that I don't know if will ever exist is a Zippy the Pinhead book with every strip where he just references Nancy, which would probably be like hundreds of strips.
Yeah.
But I think that like, if you want to read, I always tell people, if you want to like read that, like you can read the How to Read Nancy book, which is great. But if you really want to understand Nancy, you have to read Zippy the Pinhead.
I'm a big fan of this artist, and this is like his best book, I think. Curses.
Oh yeah.
Kevin, I don't know how you say.
Huizinga?
Huizinga, yeah. another book like I got it from like the Denver library like a million times, you know, when I was
Uh-huh.
first getting into comics and stuff. There's a story in here about like a evangelical like pastor who like goes golfing with Glenn Ganges, and he's like trying to convert him to go back to church the whole time. It's called like this book story here is called Jeepers Jacobs.
Uh-huh.
And it's just like I'm like, how did he write that? It's amazing. Like just like all the theology and stuff that he put in there. Like he's just such a smart writer.
Are you interested in the way that cartoonists like portray religion? I know you're working on like a Mormonism book, yeah?
Yeah. I definitely like when cartoonists go there because most cartoonists don't. Like, you know, cartooning is very atheist, you know? Like
Definitely.
nobody really talks about religion or faith at all. So when somebody does, it feels like fresh to me. Like I'm like, oh shit, all right, let's hear it, you know? It adds a little bit of yeah, I don't know, it adds like a little like a quality of like realness to it or something like.
For sure. All right. My next one is someone we were just talking about. This is John
I almost pulled that off.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, this one didn't immediately jump out as like one of my picks, but the more I stared at my bookcase, I was like, it's gotta be like, if not just for the content, but for like John Porcellino himself and like what how his comics like influenced me when I was young. Like I saw a panel at SPX, and then like I just remember watching that like and hearing John Porcellino like be like, I think it's really important to like know what it's like to work in a warehouse and then calculate how much money you make to be able to print your zines and know how many zines you can make based off like a day's work or whatever, as opposed to like at a time when like that's when like Kickstarter was really coming out. And I just remember thinking like how inspiring that like mindset was, and that he was there having me already known that he had been doing the same comic my entire life. And on top of it, like I think this is one of the first comics I saw that was drawn like with such a basic style. And it's like when you hear punk music and you think like I can play that, and like you read King Cat and like you know you can't draw it because he's like a master at his simplification. And this book shows it as like, his progression, but like it does make you feel like, oh, like I should try, or I should, you know.
My next pick was actually Map of My Heart.
Yeah.
Which is like, to me, it's more accessible than King Cat Classics.
Yeah.
He's become like a better writer. At this point, he's sick. He thinks he's dying. He's developed OCD. His marriage has fallen apart. And he's working at a vitamin shop and doing these comics at night. It's like the most inspiring collection of comics. And the stories and stuff, they're heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like the deepest that comics can go. Like this is like such a solid collection. Like everybody should have this book.
Definitely. I have all the collections and all the issues, but that's one that I know people who like don't read that many comics, and that is like I have personally experienced that one being like a huge, like I want to read more comics.
Yeah, and there's even a section in here where all of a sudden he switches to drawing in pencil because he had this weird OCD thing where he felt like the fumes from the ink were making him sick.
Oh yeah.
So he couldn't even draw in ink anymore. So then all of a sudden, like his comics are like drawn in graphite, and you're like, what's that about? Like, you know?
This one is a little different, but this is Church and State. Cerebus. I can understand if someone was like, I'm not ever gonna read Cerebus, Dave Sim.
Right.
You know, I'm like not gonna say that's not a good idea, but I do really stand by the first 200 issues. Those first 200 issues, and this is Church and State Volume 2. This is like around when Gerhard becomes his background artist, which is like in issue 60 or 80, something like that. And this is like where I really think like the stride hits. Cerebus in general was also like a huge one for me because of the style of that self-publication and like the incredible hard work of like going from bi-monthly or whatever every other month to just once a month. And like that jump, and then actually completing the 300 issues like the goal was from like 15 years or like 20 years before it ended. He was like, oh, it's going to be like 300 issues. Again, like Dave Sim can be pretty pompous and definitely he's problematic, but you know, the things that he did do, I think a lot of self-publishing people have him to thank in some merit that like he just pushed a lot of boundaries. And I also just think that like church and state, this is just one where he's running for president. It's just like, as boring as that sounds, like it's just like he's running for president. But on top of, you know, if you're up to like references, like he has like the Sandman characters in here and stuff like that are really interesting. And then I don't know, I just love the art and
Yeah.
the whole story. I've never dived into like Spider-Man or Batman or anything like that, but I had, even though I wasn't reading when Cerebus was coming out, that is like, it felt nice to dive into this like long.
All right, let me show you
Let's see.
one of my next ones. I just pulled off the shelf when I like just immediately like, is this Lily Carey, The Lagoon?
I haven't read that.
This comic, look, this makes me like, if I read this will make me want to do something, to rip it off, basically.
Yeah.
Because it's a great self-contained short story that's just like really individual and strange. Like about like sort of like a Loch Ness monster, kind of, not a Loch Ness monster, but a creature of the Black Lagoon type of creature who like sings this song that kind of like draws people in to their doom and stuff.
Yeah.
But when I read something like this, I'm just like, fuck, I want to just like write a short story. Like I want to just like write like just a piece of fiction that is like perfect for Fantagraphics, you know?
Yeah.
Like, cause this is such a Fantagraphics book. And I don't know what happened to her. I guess she moved into animation or something, but like I loved her drawing so much. And it, you know, it was also like of that era of like mid 2000s, like Bust magazine. And like this book just makes me want to like write and draw comics. And that's like, that's the stuff I would like, that I value the most, you know?
Totally. That feeling is, that's a good one to get out of a book.
Yeah. And I also, just as a bonus, is this book of hers, Heads or Tails? You have this one?
No, I've seen that one around, but I haven't read that either.
It's like brilliant. This is like when, you know, from here, it's like all kind of like illustration, just like basically just her being a cartoonist, like telling a story.
Yeah.
And then you get to Heads or Tails, and this is like more about like design. So it gets like more kind of illustration-y. Maybe her interests were just shifting or something, or she was getting bored with that, because her style becomes more just like flat textures on top of each other.
Yeah.
And a lot of these were published in Mome, that anthology, which like to me is like my holy grail of anthologies. Like it was like the greatest thing.
That's when you were probably like, what is that, early 2000s is when that started?
Yeah, 2000. I think it started in 2005.
You were never in it?
I was in it, yeah.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, I got in there eventually, but I worked really hard at it. That's how I got published with Fantagraphics in general. It was like the Comics Journal, the print, you know, magazine, the book they had, and then from there to Mome, and then from Mome to just them publishing my books. But like I always wanted to get into Mome because it was like that's where all the cool people were. You know, Samuel Bell and stuff. Like
totally.
Yeah. I mean, I still look at those. I have them all, and I will like flip through them sometimes, and just like.
I only have a few. How many? There's like what, 20 or so they made it?
22.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the last one, it was like he just took every submission that he had, or all the ones that he had already okayed, and just put them all together as one volume. So it's like a thicker volume.
Oh, okay.
And it's great because at the end of that, it has like Charles Forsman, like all these guys like Nick Dranasso, all these people who like are now like of my generation who are now well-known cartoonists. And we were all like just basically baby cartoonists at that point, you know.
Oh, I haven't read 22. I need to find that one. That one, you know, I just recently, I guess I say recently, but I tabled at this convention, and I was next to Chuck Forsman, and I like I already owned one, but I had forgotten that I even had it. Was that Nick Dranasso like 9/11 comic?
Oh yeah, that's dark, man.
I know, but I had forgotten. You know, I love Sabrina, of course. And then I went back and I was going through some of my comics, and I was like, wow, I totally forgot that it was the same guy that like did this comic. But I got like a second copy of it because Chuck had his old like oily archive box for sale and stuff, which was, like I mean, those comics are ones that it wouldn't be easy for me to replace after a fire, but like reading The End of the Fucking World and getting it every month in my mailbox was like That was like my favorite thing. So this is like 2011 or 12 or something, and so Melissa colored it and Chuck drew him. He was like, you sent a photo,
That was so
and
cool.
then on the back it has like the logo.
Yeah, that was cool, man. I wish he was still doing that stuff.
Me too, man. That was probably where I heard about DeForge too, as like a just exploring into that world. Like, there's a lot of good people.
Yeah, that was a good era too, man.
So, how many books did you pick? You told me, was it 5 or 6?
I picked 6.
Okay, cool. I have 6. So.
Okay. Are you next? I think you're next.
Yeah. All right. These ones, it doesn't matter what order. I picked volume 10 of Barefoot Gen.
Oh shit!
Have you read this?
I only have volume 1.
Okay, volume 1 is amazing. That one is just totally heartbreaking. I picked this one because if I was on the desert island, this one is like very inspiring because it's the final book where things you start to look up as much as possibly can. This was one of the first mangas that I read. I was living with my old roommate Ryan, and he had all 10 and was like, man, you got to read these books. And just following Gen on that journey through post Hiroshima and as like a little kid, he's just like the most amazing character. And like he's just so strong no matter whatever crazy stuff is going on. And it was like a very, very impactful read. I've read it through a couple times, and I recommend anyone that can track down the 10 books. And they're back in print, so they're easy to find. This like printing, when I was trying to find it, I remember there was a couple books that were like crazy prices online. But now I know they're all back in print, and I encourage anyone to give it a read, especially if you were raised like me in America, where your version of World War II is that you had to drop the nuclear warhead. It was our only option, and that we won because of it. So it's like totally cool that we did it. And when you read his account of actually surviving that bombing and how he viewed it, it's just amazing to have the Japanese perspective on the whole thing. And it's like it's just an amazing story. So this was one that, yeah, my inspiring with the wheat on the cover. His dad is always like, be like wheat, which I think is an amazing part of the book. But yeah,
Oh, I gotta read that.
yeah, and also because that's like my introduction to manga. Like I've read obviously a lot more manga since, but I like reading all 10 of those books. I was like, yeah, my first time ever reading like an extremely long manga and just being like, wow, this is that's not even extremely long, but like One Piece would be like extremely long. But
I'm sure you'll have to agree with this one. This is Julie Doucet, My New York Diary.
oh yeah, that one's amazing.
This is like but I've reread this one every year. It's like in my annual list, and I've taken so much from this. Like just how she packs the panels and stuff.
It's so good. I just read it for the first time like last year, I think, and it's amazing.
She gets a job at the Village Voice as a cartoonist, and she's dating a guy who's also a cartoonist, but like he apparently sucks. So he's really jealous of her. And he's just like, well, they only hired you because you're a woman. This is bullshit. And she has how she lost her virginity story in here.
Yeah.
Which is so creepy.
Yeah.
It's just so bizarre.
And she really has a real, like, her drawing style is really, it feels so, it just feels completely her own. It's like really cool.
Yeah. And she's, like this cover here. There's like several covers to this book.
Yeah, mine's like a blue one.
Yeah, this is like a woodblock print that she made or something.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
So yeah, I mean, this is like the only one. I have 2 copies of this book. And then I almost pulled just the complete Dirty Plot. Because that's a pretty amazing one. But just for suitcase space, this is like the cream of the crop for like Julie Doucet,
Yeah, for sure.
And she also is interesting because like she just distanced herself from comics, but like comics can't get over her. Like,
yeah.
Like people are like still like super obsessed with her, and she like hasn't really done like a proper comic in how long? 20 years maybe or something. Yeah. Is this your last one? Let's see.
My last one. So this one's kind of cheating, and I would just pick one of these if I had to. But I guess if you buy this, it comes as all 3. And this is the box set of. This is the Uncle Scrooge one.
God damn, I'm jealous, man. Oh my God, I'm so jealous.
So there's 10 of these. This is like the Another Rainbow, Uncle's Complete Carl Barks. And this is volume 3, which is Uncle Scrooge 1 to 20. And like, I'm just a huge Barks fan. And I think like Uncle Scrooge is probably my favorite character. I just like really love the adventure comics that he is involved in. One like any of those good 20 pagers that Barks did to me are just like, it's like those comics like draw me in like just like no other comic does. Like it just feels like so much fun to dive into one of those. So that's why I would be like, if all my comics burned down, I would definitely need some Barks in my life to escape that tragedy. And so Barks would maybe be one of the first ones I had to redo.
I've never seen that before, that collection.
Yeah, there's 10, and these ones are like I owned a lot of those Fantagraphics ones. That's actually the first one I read of Barks. I was buying those Fantagraphics ones, and I ended up selling them all just because it's the same stuff. It's like the third time that Barks has been completely republished. While the Fantagraphics ones they're really nice. These ones have they are in black and white, and they have like more essays. Like these are like essays that they're not republished anywhere. And so there's lots of essays, and they're published. Like you have like the actual cover, and then exactly like how it would have looked like as an actual comic. And like they're just beautiful books. Like I'm a big fan of like some people I think really love to collect like the actual like issues of stuff like Little Lulu or Barks or the ECs and stuff. But I really like these hardback ones that came out in the 80s. Like those, I don't know if you own any of the Russ Cochran collections.
Yeah, I have the only one I have is Panic.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's one of the ones I actually don't have, but I own I really like those collections. I just think they sit really nice on a bookcase, and they're very sturdy, and owning like a comic from 1950 is kind of stressful to me. Like it's
yeah.
As you know, I can't like read it the way I want to read it, which is like in my backyard on my lap, like while I'm like, like these books are expensive, but they're like very durable. So a lot of people have like a nostalgia, they love like the shitty printing of comics, and like I do too. It can be like amazing, and like that's like where I think a lot of like the comics magic can come from, is like the horrible printing that they just had to use because it was cheap. Mm-hmm. But like I always imagine like if comics were treated like Fantagraphics like pushes for, like to be on the same level as just literature, then like this is how comics would have like come out in the 40s or 50s. You would be like, oh, like it's this incredible piece of art, and it comes out in like a nice book, and like this is like what it deserves. So I always really enjoy these collections, on top of just the fact that I think Carl Barks is like an absolute like master. You don't even have to read it. Like I'm always like, you can like, if you were a little kid and you just flip through this and you never read a single word, like his panels are so like they explain exactly what's happening on the same level as like if you read it, you get like a little extra. I don't know. I just think I'm like fully obsessed with Carl Barks. I think he's just like one of the true masters.
Yeah. Which there's 10 of those collections, right? That encompasses everything that Carl Barks did, right?
Yeah.
Which volume is that?
Say what?
Which volume is that in that?
This is volume 3.
Oh, okay.
Volume 8 is like the easiest one to get. Like you can actually pick up that one. That one must be the first one that came out. I can't remember. Maybe like the Andy story is in there. Like some of the more famous one is like in that collection. I would have to look again, but that's one that comes up. Like you can get it. You can actually buy these cheaper than like when these came out. They were like $150 or so, and you can find that one for like $70 or so, which is like, I don't know, for 3 amazing hardcover books. It's like, you're paying like $20-some a book. But that in the earlier, like in volume 1 or volume 2, you actually get like Barks like storyboards to like when he was working as an animator at Disney. And so like you get like for like it's like storyboards for movies that were never made. And so like if that's like your interest, if you're like a real Disney animation nerd, then it's like, well, you gotta like that's something that like I would be very surprised to see that like be republished because it just is such a niche interest. But like as I love research and I love history, and so like to see it like just like completely collected, I'm like, man, that is just so cool. But
Yeah,
there's another Rainbow did Little Lulu too.
I
Did
know.
volumes of Little Lulu, which are equally. I have those and they're amazing because again, you get the essays and the essays are just like it's just like the true genius, like the people who know Barks and John Stanley like best write these amazing essays.
Yeah, the little Lulus I have actually, and these might be. I mean, I love these so much, but they're these like little digests.
Those ones are amazing
Yeah.
because it does everything. The another Rainbow one stops at issue something,
Mhm.
but that and then I have those ones, but I only have I like go from like volume like 16 on or whatever is the ones I have of those.
Oh, okay. I have the first 11.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I have these are actually more cool or cooler to me anyway. The versions that are in color.
Yep.
They don't recolor them. It's like the actual color.
Yeah.
You know.
I have there's 4 of those Tubby books. I have all of those as well. They're that coloring style because there's Little Lulu. Yeah, I know. They're so nice. Yeah, it's like I love that coloring style. It looks so good.
Yeah. These are. I mean, man, I would hate if my house burned down and I lost these.
Totally, man. Those would equally be those ones are like where it's like I own like 15 of them, and if I'm ever like, oh, I just need to take something to take with me to like the doctors to read, like you just like pop Little Lulu, and like you're just like, oh, anyone will do. Like they're
Yeah,
all
yeah, yeah. And you know, D&Q is reprinting them now, but I actually prefer the little paperback ones to the hardcover. Like, you know, it's you don't really need a prestige format for these. Like, maybe it's just more accessible to have like a paperback collection of them.
yeah. I feel I've like seen the Drawing Quarterly one, and it looks really nice, and if like if that's like the most accessible thing to you, I'm like go for it because they also colored it in a really cool way too. It's not because those are all black and white, and the Drawing Quarterly ones are like they're colored more like that Tubby book, which is cool.
Yeah, I have one of them is let's see, Tubby. This one here. Do you have this one?
Yeah.
The Dell cover. It's just
Yeah.
and stuff. It's so I love that stuff, man. And somebody you just know that some nerd owns that original art, and it's like
I know.
a stack somewhere.
My Jason Hamlin has this like huge stack of Little Lulu fanzines.
Whoa, really?
And like a guy that was like in the fan group or like was in that circle in like the 70s or 80s sold him every issue, and it's like it's like it was like a newsletter that would come out, and I was trying to track the guy down, but because it started in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is like just like, and I was like, oh my god, like this guy from Virginia was like a Little Lulu nut. But
dude, how many pages would each one be?
some of the I think there were like 6 or so pages, 6 to 8 or something like that, and
You
it was
could
like
just reprint them all as like a little book or something.
I know it would be amazing. It kind of like needs to happen. I
Yeah.
think that fanzine, like re-putting out a fanzine, is something that like it's definitely on my radar.
Wow.
Yeah, this was exactly on that mindset of I loved Ryan Holmberg's Instagram, and it's just like has a ton of knowledge, and he's living the life that we all wish we lived, which was chilling in Japan and hanging out with Tado Suge and whatever, singing karaoke with Baron Yoshimoto, I think is his name. And like, you're like, man, this guy, but he did a lot of documentation on stuff that like, especially as someone like when I was starting Bubbles, it can be really difficult to go more than surface level on manga, especially on just English language Google. And so to like getting his Instagram, I was like, man, this is like the real behind the scenes of, and I am like have like a fascination with translation. So like immediately the first time I met Ryan was we got lunch and I did an interview for Bubbles #3.
Mhm.
And from then on we've kept in touch, and this book just started with me saying like, man, we tabled together at a zine fest, and I said, hey man, you should make a zine with your Instagram post. Just put like 20 into a zine, because we tabled at Durham Zine Fest and he was just tabling with like 2 books, and I was like, man, you should make a zine for your table. Like, and this started as a zine. Like literally I have it in my zine folder on my computer, but it's so far from I think of it is like a zine, it's a book, but it's not, the way I created it, it's not that different than how I would have created like a zine. And like,
Yeah, I've got to get a copy of that. Any manga that you see always has Ryan's name on it.
if you're into the weird stuff, then yeah, that's going to be the case. In the back, I updated in Bubbles #3. I made a list of all his books, because he still doesn't have a website. Ryan, if you're watching this, he's but you can see the list.
Oh, great!
That's every book that he's touched for the most part, as far as like an actual, and like that's, if you're into weird manga, then like that's mostly going to be what you're in. It's like he's done wonders for it.
And you would know him too. Like if you're into weird manga, everybody knows Ryan Holmberg.
Oh yeah, because he's not just a translator; he writes like incredible essays.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But no, this is a book I've been ripping off for the past few years. This is Seth. It's a Good Life if you don't weaken.
Oh yeah, the good stuff.
I mean, this like basically taught me how to write using myself as a character.
Totally.
And not have it be self-deprecating, which is like a big hurdle that every young cartoonist has to get over.
Yeah.
You start just doing like, I'm the worst or whatever, and then eventually you got to mellow out and like give us who you actually are, what your day-to-day is actually like. And this book like definitely taught me that lesson, and I'm still doing that, because when that was like when people started taking me more seriously as a cartoonist, is when I stopped doing like myself as this disgusting, horrible person, and then like started actually writing more mellowed out storylines, like about like what my life is actually like, and and stop just trying to be funny. It's like,
yeah.
But yeah.
I think it took comics like a while to figure that out, especially with like in like a post Jeffrey Brown world and stuff. That that is interesting, because it is tough to like really know yourself and like really write about yourself.
Because your instinct is just to be like totally like goof on yourself and try and make people like laugh or whatever, or just make yourself seem like a real jerk to people.
Yeah,
it's just such a rookie move, and like a lot of like male cartoonists especially, that's like how you'll start out, and hopefully you'll mature past that point.
Definitely reading Seth or John Porcellino as well are 2 people who really have opened up that dialogue into more than just I'm an idiot, like, everyone hates me, blah blah blah, like playing that victim. We talked about, I once talked to Dash, and he was talking about how I think some of that influence of that like self-deprecating like pity comes from like like maybe reading Peanuts as like like being that like you make yourself like the Charlie Brown character, which is interesting, as someone who like, I think that's like what a lot of those people like you grow up reading, and you like everyone loves Charlie Brown, but it's like, why do we love him? Is because he's like kind of like pathetic, and but also so sweet, and so like you kind of want to make yourself that Charlie Brown character, which I thought was a really good analysis by Dash.
And also Robert Crumb. I mean, Robert Crumb's he makes drawing like a sniveling, hunched over weirdo, sweating and stuff, so much fun. It's like addictive to male. They all want to draw themselves as like weird perverts or something, and you like drawing yourself as like a monster. So I think maybe not so much anymore, but for people from my generation, Crumb definitely put us on that path,
Definitely. Definitely Seth is on the next level of with what his influences are onto what he writes.
Yeah, because his influences were like New Yorker cartoonists and stuff. So it's
Yeah.
it's like more refined and more respectable and stuff. And that's what he was striving for. And I feel like a lot of people like him were striving to make comics a more respected art form, and something that like maybe just a regular person could read and get into and not be weirded out. Because if a regular person picks up like a R. Crumb comic or whatever, they're like, ew, like what is this? Like,
Which was like the point, it was like we want to repulse these people, and it was the 60s or whatever, but like definitely things like It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken is like a super accessible book to people who just enjoy storytelling.
Yeah. A bonus book, Late Bloomer by Carol Tyler.
Okay, I haven't read that.
Awesome. Fantastic collection. And then another bonus. Everybody has to. This is obvious, of course, man. But yeah, the 8-Ball collection.
Definitely. I was looking at my death ray and thinking like, should I pick Ghost World? Like Ghost World would be one. I just reread 8-Ball during this COVID because I have like this article that I've been kind of working on about like the series, and like, man, getting the Ghost World was so amazing because it's so much of that self-deprecating like narration humor, which can be really funny. But like, man, by the time you get the Ghost World in that series, like reading them in a row, you're like, man, the no narration is just such a breath of fresh air. There's like such that comic really stands on its own. Here's my bonus book that I had with Boys Club.
Oh yeah.
This is just like, for me, it's just like the funniest comic I've read. I think the art is amazing, and I think just like the timing of like the humor. I think it's really hard to write like an actually funny comic. I laugh in my head at comics all the time, but I don't laugh out loud at comics. Like, it's pretty rare. And this is one that like I've laughed out loud the 50th time I've read it. I still really enjoy it. So yeah.
I'll put a link in this video to the Bubbles website where people can get copies of the issues.
Yeah.
And
I'll show off my new one.
Yeah.
So this is the newest one. I had this guy John Vasquez Mijas, I think is how you say his name. He did this Puerto Rican war comic. It's like a woodcut comic, which I don't know where it is. I have it somewhere, but I had him, and then this Chinese artist Zingyada, and this who's like more contemporary artist, kind of on like an arts comic kind of tip. Terry Kalkanian, he made this comic New Beginnings. It's like a black and white boom comic that my friend Corey McDonald, he did that interview and submitted it. So that was a really cool one. Ryan Holmberg wrote this article about the Durham mural protest, and he had like a bunch of people. There was a few people that had like comic and manga stuff like in their art, or more like anime stuff like in their paintings, and he took time to interview them and kind of discuss like fandom and like anime fandom and like race in anime and like how that's portrayed, and a whole bunch of great dialogue that he constructed. So that was like a really cool one. I had John, he like did this woodcut the first time I've had it. So he did this woodcut for me. That's in the
Great.
That's for the top. I was pretty stoked on that. That was pretty fun. I was a really big fan of Puerto Rican Wars, so it's cool to have like see exactly how it was created.
Yeah, that's cool. Awesome, man. Well, hey, man, I'm gonna let you go, but I really appreciate you coming on. And
definitely, man. Thanks for having me, man. It was fun to share my fire sale books or whatever they're.
Hey, real quick, if you like what I'm doing on this channel and you want to help support it, I really appreciate it. There's a link in the description for my Patreon. You'll get access to my weekly comic strip and exclusive videos from this channel. Thanks a lot.